Kia ora iwi. Thank you very much for coming out in great numbers for this session today. It should be a really interesting discussion. We've got about 90 minutes, so plenty of time to sharpen your minds for questions too, because I think that's going to be quite a big part of our conversation, our kōrero today. So I'll open it up for questions, maybe even after an hour or so, depending on how we're going. So, turn your minds to that perhaps quite soon. Activists are central, really, aren't they, to our social, civic and political life nowadays. And today we have four prominent activists to talk about their own personal and political journeys. And then we're going to try and find some eloquence around the commonalities and try and strand together some of the ways that activism is done and practiced now and how it impacts on the society that we have. Shaneel Lal is Young New Zealander of the Year. Congratulations on that award. And he's outdone me for the camel outfit, I think, today, quite seriously. A leading activist for the trans community in Aotearoa, welcome to you. Liz Mellish is an activist with many hats, really, aren't you? Feminist, Māori activist, Te Aotearoa descent, Taranaki, Ngāti Rurunui. So, kia ora, welcome to you.
Kia ora, Guyon.
Dame Catherine Healy has spent a lifetime fighting for the rights of sex workers and others, and continues to do so. Welcome to you. Denis O'Reilly is a justice campaigner, among many other things, and has fought for many years for reform of the justice system. Kia ora, tēnā koe. And you've brought a friend?
Yeah, just to remind us, he likes ladders. Tami would often, if he was addressing the Waitangi Tribunal, who'd be on a stage, he would climb a ladder.
You probably don't need it like I do, but you've got a mic there if you need it.
Oh, can't wait.
That's it. Now we've all got our batons. Some of us are ready to pass them on, possibly, and some of us aren't. So before we try and weave together what are very different roles in activism, let's find out a little bit more about the journeys that have led all of you to the stage. I'm going to start with you, Denis. And I love this quote. You've been quoted as saying that you came to Black Power as an act of community service. Looking back now, do you still see it that way?
Oh, very much so. Yep. People have asked me whether I have thought I've wasted my life, and quite the contrary. I was with about 200 young Black Power leaders, women and men, just last Saturday in Rotorua, and compared to how we were in the 1970s, the effect of kohanga reo, of kura kaupapa Māori, of the re-emergence of tribal identities, these young people are good for this country, even though most people may not feel it.
You said that when you presented yourself at the door of the whare of the Black Power, they accepted me unconditionally, even though I'm Pākehā. I experienced a sense of belonging, whānau, and unconditional love. Is that the attraction of a gang, do you think, that feeling?
Yes, I think so. I'm a bit atypical. I brought up in a upwardly mobile Irish Catholic family, reasonably well educated, went to train to be a Catholic priest when I left school, was completely stuffed up when I left the seminary. Mind you, I got introduced to alcohol, which has been a great relief in my life. I went to go to Wellington to study law, and ended up working at a service station. Our family had a service station, that's what I knew. And next minute, I met these fellows who had come in, they drank down at the tramways, the police would pick on them. It didn't seem fair to me, I was articulate, and the next minute I was in.
That's interesting. So it didn't seem fair to me. So because I was going to ask at some point, are activists born or made? But there's obviously something in some people that goes, hang on, that's not right. I want to change that.
John Robson said that, John Robson, who was the Secretary for Justice under Ralph Hannon, probably the most reforming, all those old Tories back in the late 1960s actually really introduced some fantastic change in the criminal justice system. And Robson said we should have an eternal dissatisfaction with the present, and we should be mobilised by ceaseless activism. And yeah, I reckon.
That's interesting. I just thought of Rob Muldoon when you said that, because he was he had this strange connection, didn't he, with the gangs? Well, I don't know if it's a strange connection.
Had Rob Muldoon been born brown, he would have either been in the mongrel mob or the Black Power. I mean, both his matrilineal and patrilineal lines were essentially socialists, and he, in many ways, was a socialist. He was a prick as well.
What are you trying to say? Hey, are gangs a force for good? That's one of those questions.
You wouldn't want to build a castle on sand, Guyon, and which is why in the 1970s we always tried to start our work co-ops on the basis of a marae or a sports club or whatever. Gangs are essentially a culture of alienation, and they will swallow themselves, and that's just the nature of it. And they come from a very hurt place. The two Indigenous gangs, the major Indigenous gangs, come out of the boys' homes, out of state care, and the Royal Commission has revealed all of the counterness to that. I do not understand where the hell ACT are coming from with this desire to build more prisons and all that crap. But anyway, people are, a force for good. And if people can organise on the basis of something that's sustainable, and a gang isn't sustainable, it's on the way through. Someone asked me yesterday or wherever, what's his name? Started the new broadcast thing up. Guyon, no, not Guyon Espiner.
Have I entered the wrong room?
Anyway,
Paddy Gow. Who else do I get mistaken for?
Yeah.
Duncan Garner.
Duncan Garner.
There you go. I did a whole interview with Christopher Luxon where he thought that he was talking to Corin Dan.
Yeah.
And then he started to argue with me. He said, but it says Corin Dan on my sheet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, get off your talking notes, bro.
Well, all us Parkers look the same. That's the trouble. See? But he said, "We all
look the same.
When will it all end?" And my answer was, "When it's irrelevant. When people have returned home."
Okay, we'll come back to some of that, because I just want to, as I said at the outset, tease a bit more of your personal stories out so we can start to weave together some of the commonalities later on. So let's go to you, Dame Catherine Healy. It's fair to say, isn't it, you've spent a lifetime as an activist for the rights of sex workers. Would that be fair?
Well, in balance, I did have a life before. So, I grew up in a leafy suburb over the hills in Eastbourne, did all the usual things, read, that word prostitute, never thought much about it, as you wouldn't. Who are they? They weren't in my realm of experience.
Because you were a Wellington primary school teacher, right?
Absolutely, jumped the desk and found another one.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get this straight in my head. So you were a primary school teacher in the 70s and 80s, which sounds an unlikely entree into sex work, but
I don't know whether to elaborate. You all look mature.
There's a lot of nodding of heads.
But no, absolutely. I mean, I certainly didn't have it in my, sphere of, it wasn't on my horizons to be a sex worker. And in fact, the afternoon I sat with my mother reading the Evening Post adverts. I'd come back with my backpack, you know, from the wonderful trip. School teachers get fabulous holidays, you know, we did then in the 70s. And I said, Mum, I'm going to have to get another job, you know, to top up the visa card. Actually, it was more towards the mid-80s at that point, actually. And I said, look, these massage parlours, you know, they're advertising dollars, no experience. And my mother said, look, dear, if you do that, I'm going to have to go and live in Spain. And that all sounded reasonable, but, you know, I was naive. Very naive. And I took this advert, I took it to the House of Ladies on Bulcott Street. If you're a Wellingtonian, you'd know the house I mean. It sits there with this wonderful, wonderful kind of history.
Is that where the Bulcott Street Bistro is now?
It is.
Opposite St Mary of the Angels.
Keeping an eye on you. Yeah. Keeping an eye on who goes in and out. Yeah. What was the world of sex work like when it was illegal?
Well, this is the thing, you know, we looked at our watch, we were doing work, it was a job, we did shifts, we felt normal, we felt, you know, that it was the rest of the world who'd got it so wrong. We, you know, we had a lot of camaraderie. We hung together, we flattered together, and we kind of went into silos, and them lot over there, all that straight world, you know, that really, they didn't understand us. So, I mean, I'm not wanting to be glib about this. Certainly working in a criminalised environment was nerve-wracking when the police would come in. We never quite knew when they'd come in, and when they did, they'd come in undercover. And, you know, a week later, they'd come back and try and arrest us, and we couldn't remember them from Adam. You know, and we'd be expected to stand up in court and explain what we'd said on such and such a night, and we'd get a conviction. And, you know, a conviction for prostitution travels with you. Not a good thing.
And then, did your activism start in 1987 when you started the Prostitutes Collective as it was then? Is that the start of it, or had you been... Was this more embryonic earlier on?
I didn't go to kindy. I didn't like it. So I think, you know, I was a third child, and you always look upwards, you know, and I had older siblings, and I grew up through the 60s and the 70s. There were fantastic movements that we wanted to be a part of as kids going to school, like the anti-apartheid movement was big. Lots of things that we could look out to. We wagged school when Jermaine Greer came down. You know, heaps of things that were floating around that were titillating, far more interesting for us.
So prostitution was finally decriminalised in 2003, and you were a big part of that. What happens to an activist who wins?
You never win. You know, there's always something more, and we haven't finished. You know, we failed. I have a peer group who would say, why did you accept that law in the way it is? You know, 20 years ago we were sitting there in Parliament, the law passed. It wasn't a government bill, it was a private member's bill. It passed by one vote, and we knew it wasn't perfect, and we were, you know, quite sick really for some of the things that we had to trade on. And one of them, most importantly, has really stigmatised us, and people are like, well, you shouldn't have compromised on that. But it's easy to say at the time, you're pushing as many things onto the bus, as many people onto the bus as you can, and we didn't get everything we wanted. So I don't know when that day will come, but I'd like to see changes.
Fascinating. Liz Mellish, if I could turn to you and draw out some of your story. Do you think of yourself as an activist?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't be Māori and not be an activist.
Why is that? Elaborate on that.
Because every day of our lives we come across racism every single day, and you have to push back. Either you push back or you become an activist by moving so far that way, which is still an active thing to do. So that's why I say Māori are always activists. There is always something we have to push back about.
Is that you after many decades of realising what you have done, or did you always feel like that, do you reckon?
Always felt like that. I can remember being, I'm a child born in 1950, and I can remember being at school and writing about the French in Vietnam and the way they treated the Vietnamese and the way that started the war. And heaven forbid, I wrote an essay about it when I was about 14, I think, and it went into The Listener, which was a fairly new magazine at that time. And so, I looked at the world and it was patently unfair. Unfair to women and unfair to Māori.
You're a feminist too?
Yeah, probably not in the glorious feminist view that is portrayed.
Well, you burned a bra once, didn't you?
I did. Well, in Featherston, would you believe? And I have to say, we were pretty poor, we were new mums, so it was a ratty old one, and we sat round drinking wine out of cardboard boxes. I don't know if you still get wine in cardboard boxes.
Yeah. Chasseur, or country medium, I think they call it.
It was a red one and a white and a clear one. And so, and
Just trying to think which gives you the worst hangover, but yeah, sorry.
there was quite a group of us that it was a hell of a lot of fun. But really clearly for women, and I'm really talking in the 70s, our life wasn't necessarily that great. And why wasn't it great? Because we didn't have money. Because it was still really a very, very difficult for women, particularly mothers. There was no childcare, all of those things. So out of that, I set up an organisation of women and went driving round farmers in the South Wairarapa and got part-time jobs for them all. We worked a system of minding each other's children, and we also worked a system of community buying, because in those times there were cheese factories and freezing works and apple orchards and so on. So we bulk bought. One of the women had a garage, and so we shared it all out and worked it all out and put the money in to pay for it. And and we set up a shop.
Yeah, it's such a practical form of feminism, isn't it? So you're 25, you've got 3 kids, a husband and a milk run, and you are fighting for the right of women to have their own jobs, careers and power over their own lives in a really practical sense, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't have to burn a bloody old bra that probably was going to fall to bits next week, you could have burned a good one.
What do you think, and I'm probably jumping into the second half of the conversation now, but I'm just interested in what you think of some of the activism today and the symbolism and the social media messaging and stuff compared to, I'm not trying to get you to say one's better or worse, but yours seems like such a more, grassroots sort of approach. I don't know, have you got thoughts about that? Is it just different time, different technology?
We didn't have a telephone. Can you imagine? When I first got married, we couldn't have a telephone, we couldn't afford it. To buy a house, we had to sell our car. And you did that. So you didn't have resources. Today, there are resources, the social media, the ability to get onto computers almost anywhere. All of that stuff has changed the game, I think.
And I just wanted to touch on your activism for in the treaty space, because you were quite heavily involved, as I understand it, in the Te Whanganui-a-Tara claim. You led a cultural settlement for iwi in that respect. That's been a big strand of your activism too, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that was born out of the fact that things kept happening to us, like I was driving a car, you get pulled over by a cop just because you're brown. Nothing wrong, hadn't done anything wrong, those sorts of things. So it niggled. But in the meantime, I'm raising 3 children with my husband, doing a business and some other bits and bobs. And I get a call from my cousin Ngātata who says, oh, look, Lizzie, we need someone to go and sit in a house in Wellington and you might get arrested. I haven't got any money to pay you. This is all part of the claims situation. This was number 9, Pipitea Street in Wellington. This activism was not published very well in Wellington because Parliament was just across the road. No government really wanted Māoris occupying at that point. And, but anyway, we did it. We sat there. We had no furniture. We had $10. We went down to the second-hand shop, Charlie Hohaia and I, and bought a desk. A public servant who shall not be named in those times worked in a government department and said, well, we've got some spare chairs. They might just appear on the footpath in about half an hour. So down we drive and pick them up. So we've now got a chair to sit on. It was great fun. Yes, the police came twice. Office of Treaty Settlements, that infamous, horrible institution, called the police and tried to have us arrested. There's a little bit more to it. This house, Office of Treaty Settlements, offered to lease it to us. It's on our land, right? So we own the land and all the houses around it. So they said, oh, well, you can pay $1 a month. That's fair. No, it's not.
Your own land.
No, it's not. So we wouldn't pay the dollar either.
Yeah. Interesting. Shaneel Lal, you won the Young New Zealander of the Year award. Am I right in saying that was largely for your contribution to ending conversion therapy in Aotearoa?
Yep.
Yeah. How did you do it?
Gosh, now I have the benefit of hindsight, and I think that it was a series of fortunate events, but when we were doing it, we really thought we would not get it across the line because it was so contentious. I grew up in Fiji during a time homosexuality was a crime. So I was about 10 years old when Fiji decriminalized homosexuality, and I knew that I was like a flaming queer growing up in a country that criminalized people like me. But about the age of 7, I was in class 2 and my friend had brought nail polish to class and we wore Crocs to school back then. And I'd put nail polish on my toenails and my teacher had seen it and she just had one of the most evasive reactions. And in Fiji, the way that they discipline children is put simply illegal in New Zealand. You beat children up to discipline them. And so I got a beating, and the word made it home that I was wearing nail polish, and then my granddad said, no more girly things for you, no more dolls, none of that. Fiji is a collectivist community, which means that the elders can take care of each other's children and no one bats an eye. So my conversion therapy started with, do you love your family? And do you want to be a part of your community? And as a kid who had known nothing but their community, the answer was always yes, I want to be a part of my community. So I went into conversion therapy. And it escalated to exorcisms and beatings, and at the height of it, just extreme violence. So I moved to Aotearoa in 2014. And for 3 years, I thought that New Zealand did not allow conversion therapy. But at 2017, I was volunteering at Middlemore Hospital, and it was summer. And a church leader walked up to me and offered to pray my gay away. And I said, good luck. Well, I wish I'd said good luck, but I refused. So he looked at me and he said, it's hot, but do you know what's hotter? Hell. And at the idea, at 7, the idea of going to hell was quite frightening. But at 17, if all the gays are going to hell, that's what I prefer
You wanted
to
to be there. Yeah. That's the coolest bar, isn't it? Probably at that point, yeah. So that's a real defining moment then, right? You're volunteering at Middlemore 2017. Is that the light bulb moment where you think, I can change this, or how did flow from there.
It was an absolute turning point. What had happened in 2016 was the first time I'd openly kind of accepted that I was queer or gay or whatever you would call it. I was in my English class and we were doing our speeches. I was in year 11. And the boy who was sitting in front of me was a Christian fundamentalist, and he was writing his speech about the importance of faith. And because I was an overtly feminine kid, he used to antagonize me by saying a lot of homophobic things. And one day he just said, you know, gays are going to hell. And I said, well, what evidence do you have that your God exists? And now for a Christian fundamentalist who had never been questioned in his life about the existence of his God, that was a terrifying thing for him to hear. So he gets up and he starts thumping his fist on my table. And I get back up and I start thumping my fist too. Because all my life I thought that if I openly started identifying as queer, I would get abused. But in 2016, I wasn't openly identifying as queer and I was getting abused anyway. And in that moment, I realized whether I'm hiding or not, these people are going to come for me. So I may as well get out there and start fighting back.
Wow, that's a big call, isn't it? That's profound. So you started this, I think it was the Conversion Therapy Action Group in 2019. Why did you decide to take it down that route? Why was that the structural path to law change, did you think?
In 2018, you know, my life just series of fortunate events, I say. In 2018, I got selected to be Labour MP Jenny Celeste's youth MP. In 2019 was Youth Parliament. Youth Parliament is basically when young people go and pretend to be parliamentarians in Parliament for about 2 days. And I was lucky enough to be in Youth Parliament, and I got up that day, and I was like, what do I fight for? And I got up that day, and I didn't really plan on doing it, but I got up and, you know, something in me said, Mr. Speaker, when I woke up this morning, I didn't look in the mirror and say, oops, I'm gay, better fix that. And the entire house just erupted in laughter. And in that moment, I knew that this is where I need to be.
And what now for you? Because again, you've had, I mean, that's a very early success. I mean, you know, I think we've probably all changed some law at some point. I'm not comparing my feats to any of you, but that's a very early win, isn't it? Don't you think?
Yes, and the difficulty with that is that I was about 20 years old, 19 years old, when an article appeared in the Herald about me. And that's the first time I thought that I no longer had things under my control. I no longer control the narrative. And at that stage, I realized that if I wanted to be taken seriously by politicians and political institutions, I had to give up everything that brought me joy. And those were all the things that made me young. Activism stole my youth entirely. And so when I got to the end of, you know, banning conversion therapy, I felt like life had passed me by. I felt like I had allowed myself to sit in my room and rot as all of the other people experience some really core experiences that young people have. And I just missed out because I wasn't allowed to do them. I couldn't go to a club without someone recording me and giving it to the Herald.
So what is your reaction to that? How do you want to take that from now? I mean, are you saying that you want to give away your activist hat?
Absolutely not. I think I was a bit afraid because I was afraid of being discredited. And because when you're a young queer person leading the movement to ban conversion therapy, you must be squeaky clean. No one can criticize you. So in that part, when I was leading the movement, I gave it up. I've proven myself. And I don't need to prove myself any further. So what I do is, recently people found shirtless pictures of my body and posted it on the internet saying, is this the person you want as a role model for your children? And I just realized there's nothing I can do that these people will not criticize. So I may as well just accept myself and stop striving for conservative ideals of leadership. You know what? I can post a shirtless picture of myself on the internet and still be very competent as Young New Zealander of the Year.
I think I saw a shirtless picture of Bill English once. Do you remember that? Boxing, yeah. So, do we feel we know them a little better now? Yeah. So we should start trying to weave some of these things together. And I'd be interested in, your thoughts listening to those stories, Denis, about what it tells you about activism and what it tells you. You must have been thinking, listening to some of those, there's a resonance of some of the things I did or didn't do. What did you feel and think listening to these stories?
You don't have to be perfect, Mike.
Yeah. You've got a loud voice.
You don't have to be perfect. You've just got to be available. That's what Jimmy Baxter taught us. You do your best. We are human, after all, and people need to relate to you. Don't go and bash yourself up like that. And we're sitting here and we're all on the slide side of life, apart from you. And the Rimatuckers, it's quite steep. And
I'm probably halfway up the Rimatuckers, aren't I? Be fair? Am I on the other side of that?
yeah, so I mean, I find myself these days, I consider myself as a coach of a next generation.
Well, this
of
is interesting. So
activists.
let's do some of this. You guys pick your mics up because we want to talk to each other, right? Because this is interesting. So yeah, Haere tonu.
Go and read Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. And you'll get, he was a little short Jew from New York. I worked with a guy called Wayne Widdis, and he told me about Alinsky, and he went to a North American Indian reservation. And it was the time of the sort of revival of those Indian nations. And there was an alcohol problem, and the place looked terrible, and there's violence in the place. And Alinsky berated all these men, and they started to get, and Widdis was saying, God, fuck, I thought we're gonna get killed. And then at the very moment he turned and said, and when we've cleaned ourselves up, we're going to attack the white man, or whatever. And it's that, it's being prepared to confront yourself and yourselves, your peers, and not being above, or below, but being beside. I think it's a song like that or something in there. But anyway, it's that sort of thing. So yeah, good on you. Go for it.
Catherine Healy, you must see some resonance across these stories to your own battles.
Yes, I do. That idea of mentoring, I think, I'm learning. People come into our community bases around the country and they teach us oldies lots. And it's funny because sometimes I have to kind of hold myself, really. The school teacher, repress that school teacher urge to say, look, don't you think we know this? But perhaps we don't. And, to have our ears open, not to be in that arrogant space of thinking we've had all this lived experience and they can hear it from us. And it's interesting. I want to acknowledge my colleague Anna Pickering, who's sitting there in the middle, and she runs our community base up in Auckland, and will also testify that our doors are always been hammered on. You name it, people come from all over the world to find out about our model here around sex work. And you can think and you can become quite smug and think we do have all the answers, but you mustn't go down that track. You've always got to be listening and learning and mentoring. No, not for us. It's an exchange of information. It's backwards and forwards. It's not, like you sit still and we'll teach you. Not a concept I like.
And one of the things you're wanting to change about the legislation at the moment is the status of us is it especially women who come into New Zealand as immigrants who want to do sex work? Tell us what the situation is there and what you would like to see change.
It's lots of people, all gender, work in the sex industry, as we know. It's not cisgendered women. It's definitely people who are gender diverse, transgender, absolutely, men, cisgendered men, the whole thing. And it's really heartbreaking. We have people who come here for many reasons, migrate. They can go and backpack around the country. They can work anywhere. But you cannot come to this country with the intention of being a sex worker.
Even though it's legal work.
You can come to this country with the intention of paying for sex.
So that's the same old double standard as it used to be, just slightly elevated, right? Yeah.
Because, we're perceived as being children and naughty children and vulnerable and, not quite the full quid. We have to be managed in our spaces. We can't be trusted. All those negative things are put on us. And, it's ancient, it's old. It was Rudyard Kipling who coined the term the oldest profession in a very disrespectful way. We coined the expression sex work and sex worker, so that people understood our mahi, what we're about.
Can you be, I'm going to put this question to you, Liz, because it's a hard one. Can you be a centre-right activist? Can you be a conservative activist? Am I wrong in thinking most activists are from the left?
I suspect you are.
Wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And why I say that, it depends on what you mean by conservatism.
Well, this is why it's going to be good fun. So let's go for it. Yeah. Tell me why I'm wrong.
So what I'm saying is, and I think about the protests that I've been involved in Wellington, and I can remember we protested about the building and the opening of the High Court in Wellington because it was on our land. And so my uncles turned up and siblings and so on, and they were all dressed up. And so what did the minister say, the Prime Minister? He said, "How nice of you to come and support us." Because we were used to dressing like that because we're urban Māori. We've always been urban Māori, and it's the difference. So, and without a doubt, there are activists who are not necessarily left or green or Party Māori. There are activists who do activism in a way that's not always visible. And let's reverse the conversation politically, because I think that conservative politicians are activists against the rest of us.
Yes, because they're activists against change. That's what conservatives are, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's about power and control and money. It's always about that. That's the paradigm we've all fought against, I think, for centuries. And that comes out of the papal bulls that happened in the 15th century. And, that going out and colonising and supporting, this is how I see it, extraction. So extraction of Indigenous knowledge, extraction out of the land, and I'm talking gold and silver and, if you look all around the world, the whole reason for all of that was a certain, and I'm just going to say it, men who want the power and control. The oppression of women all around this world, even in 2023, gives me the absolute heebie-jeebies. The issue of abortion, all of those things that are controlled by those same conservative people. So it's a different type of activism, but it's really about activism to enable the holding of power.
I'll have to learn to be wrong more often, I think. Elicited quite a nice answer. Thank you. This is quite a hard one too. Are you ready for that? Sure. What space do you give those who don't agree with you? And how do we manage that? Especially as people who are passionate about our causes. And just to background this, you got your mic. And we talked that we'd say, so I haven't sprung this on you, because we wanted to talk a little bit about how we're living in a pretty polarised world at the moment, right? And we're finding it quite difficult to talk to each other at the moment, I think, collectively as a race, as a species, as humans, not as a race. And the technology and the social media have probably played a big part in that. So I wanted to focus some of this discussion on how we deal with people we don't agree with, and whether there are techniques that we can still be a passionate activist with our cause, but maybe we can bring some people along, I guess. That's not really a question, but there's a full colon for you to say something.
Yeah, I think a lot of activists fall into this bad habit of preaching to the choir, because it's so nice to say something and have everyone clap for you and tell you that you're absolutely right. However, that's not where change happens, because those people already agree with you. You need to have conversations with people who disagree with you and hopefully change their mind in a way or another. In year 9, it was 2014, and I made a friend who grew up in the Tongan church, very conservative Christian, and at the time absolutely hated the gays, and somehow became my friend. In 2018, I went to my first Pride parade, and she was there by my side. And it was that 4 years of friendship that has changed her heart. And the problem is, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And it's often the human interactions and human connections with people that change the heart of people. And my fear is that currently what we're doing is we're getting on the internet and yelling down at anyone who disagrees with us, and we're turning people away from our causes. And this whole polarization, and I think younger people have a bigger problem with this, because we're going to either the Greens or the ACT. We're not really sticking with Labour and National. They're going to die out as I'm 1040. And 20 years, I'm giving it 20 years. And unfortunately, while, I have my political affiliations, my fear is that people on the extreme left and people on the extreme right do not want to talk to each other. Instead, they want complete power and rule over the other side. It is no longer about compromising and negotiating to move us forward. Instead, it is how do we get complete domination over the other side and teach them a lesson.
Yeah, because that journey, and it's quite a moving story, that couldn't have happened over the internet, could it? You have to have a kanohi ki te kanohi basis for that, right? You can't just...
Another one, it's a very recent one, it's pronouns, right? Pronouns, they've been around for as long as people have been alive. However, it's become an issue, right? So I use they, them pronouns. And no one in my family had apparently heard of them until I started using them. And, my parents grew up during a time homosexuality was a crime, and they probably didn't know any trans people growing up. So do I just cut my parents off because they just don't know better? And you can't...
Well, what's the answer to that?
You can't do that. I'm not going to tell people how they should live their life, but it's such a journey. Some of my best friends still misgender me time to time. However, they are committed to learning, and they're committed to changing, and I'm committed to bringing them on that journey of change. Because maybe 5 years down the line, all of my best friends will be gendering me correctly. This idea that we must absolutely cut people off from our lives because they do not agree with us is going to make us very sad, miserable, lonely people.
Yeah. Māori, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, there's no, for those of you who don't know, I think most of you do, there isn't, you don't have that problem in Te Reo Māori because it's ia, it doesn't have a gender pronoun. But okay, you were nodding your head, Liz, and I was thinking about especially older Pākehā friends and family, many of whom literally can't get their tongues around the Māori kupu because they've, be like trying to get them to do a backflip because they literally have spent a whole lifetime saying a word in a certain way. But you often find that those people are down at the Rotary Club and helping and have donated a bunch of money or working with so-and-so and aren't racists. They're just people who haven't able to actually adapt quickly enough. Do you think we're too quick to, I don't know, jump at the symbolic rather than the actual at times?
I suspect you're absolutely right.
Oh, good. I'm right.
Do I need to say any more?
Oh, you need to see heaps more. Yeah.
But actually, I live in Featherston and I work in Wellington and I mix with ngā iwi katoa. And you can't spend your day ignoring that other people have a different culture. I've got a Pākehā mother and a Pākehā husband. And I acknowledge that all the time because obviously I love them. Maybe sometimes I don't like them much, but,
Yeah, it's possible to have that, isn't it? Yeah.
But, we've always been of the mind that we work together. That the only way forward for all of us in this room, is education. Now, having been seated here listening to the parihaka authors, Mahara, Rachel and Vincent O'Malley, Paul Diamond is the moderator, and with Richard Shaw, who come from very diverse backgrounds, extremely, in fact, total opposition, and have managed to have conversations that are bloody difficult. That's the model. Out of that hui today, I believe we came away educated. I believe. And having been able to hear those stories and understanding the diversity of it, and you don't have to shift that thinking far. 0.5 degree, 1 degree, makes all the difference in the world.
That's really interesting, isn't it, Catherine? That without that foundation of knowledge, you can't find the commonality, can you? Because there aren't an agreed set of facts.
It's funny, just listening, the agreed set of facts, I don't think everything aligns, but I do think, that is sitting, it's been squashed in the lift together as you head up to speak to the select committee, and it's sitting outside and just getting to know and feel each other. And I sat next to a Catholic nun and I said, we were about to go in and speak to a select committee, and just looking through our papers, it was back in the paper era, and I said, what would the old boys say about you talking about prostitution? And the nun said, we don't listen to him. But the thing was, on that occasion, the nuns had been instructed by the Archbishop. And, they supported us. They didn't support the line they had to follow. And lots of stories like this, the Upper Hutt City Council just over the hill here. And, I was the lone voice speaking against this terrible bylaw they were introducing to make sure brothels were going to be zoned to the moon. They couldn't exist in Upper Hutt. There weren't to be any sex workers there either. And just this absolute polarisation. But going and speaking to the City Council, and every few years there would be a review of this bylaw, and it took us 20. But last year they amended this awful bylaw, and the Christian fundamentalist Catholic groups that would turn up, we had relatives in common. We would chat, and I remember, one cycle them saying, we now agree with Catherine. And, it was like, there's something human with all of our connections that we have to find, in those very, very polarised settings.
I'm going to open it up for questions soon, so sharpen your pencils or your minds on that. But Denis O'Reilly, have you got an example, or if you haven't, tell me how you do it, where you've managed to change someone's mind? If I was a three strikes guy, or, someone who thought that gangs were, just a scourge of the earth and just the only way to get rid of them was to ban the patches or whatever. How do you sit down in that situation and try and turn someone?
It's all the panelists have been saying it. It's relational, and I ran an event in Hawke's Bay with three gangs, with the Mongrel Mob, the Black Power, and the Sensible Sentencing Trust, I have a lot of fun reading the ACT billboards, sick of safer speeds, sick of driving on the left, we hear you. And the one that's going at the moment is, human rights are not based on, human rights are universal, not based on race. Absolutely. But the treaty is a property right. And the notion of property in Māori sense is kaitiakitanga. And so this notion of tangata tiriti and tangata whenua, I think is a really powerful thing. And I say to my Pākehā friends, it's a two-edged sword. That photo of Tami was taken at the front of our place before we marched down the road to the opening of our new meeting house, Hau Te Ananui at Waiuhiki. And Tami was the kai kōrero for tangata tiriti. And the cousins were all going, what the, But that notion where we who come from other lands have a right to stand here and speak by honouring the treaty and keeping this sacred deal, I think is going to bring us through this thing. It's relational, and it has to do with a sacred word. Jimmy Baxter would say that na iwi Māori are our tuakana, and we're a Taina people. And I think when you feel that you can stand here in Aotearoa and I'm going to honour this sacred deal, you come back to that whole relational thing. And so in our little community of Waiuhiki, we got smashed by Gabriel. And there were, I saw, there were young gang members helping out Pākehā whānau. There were, I was dehydrated and stuffed, and these people just came up the drive and they said, look, you go over to the marae and get a cup of tea, you look buggered. And we're at the marae, and this Indian whānau arrive up, and they've got a big bowl of curry and a big thing of rice, and the lady goes, sit down please, eat please, And I thought, wow, what a country we have. What a, it was nation building. And it seems to me that, when the shit hits the fan, we're all together, and in that moment you see each other. It's relational.
Have you spoken to Don Brash? I can give you his number, actually.
Well, so here you go. Don has actually been working with the Mongrel Mob Kingdom. You see, you'll like this, but I think one of the troubles with the Labour Party is they think that the treaty means that you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, and that you have a right. So as long as it's sort of social justice or something like that, that's sweet. But when it comes to property rights, they freak completely out. It's deep in their DNA. They can't articulate it, and that's what's going on at the moment. That's why I think Mecca's sort of taken off in a tiz. But But you know, so if we can just come back to this notion of the tangata tiriti, tangata whenua, and within tangata whenua, mana whenua, you know, and you get that thing, then we all got our, you know, we all got our place to stand.
Interesting. All right. Questions? Yes.
What impact is social media having on activism, and is there a way of minimising the polarity that's happening through social media for activists?
Great question. Do we get all of that? Yeah.
Ka nohi ki te ka nohi. Trust no other bugger. Ka nohi ki te ka nohi. Face to face. Bring it back to that.
I think as the most use-adjacent person,
Yeah, well, you know, at the risk of bragging, I have 58,000 followers on Instagram.
that's lots.
Yeah,
about
that's
15
a lot
now.
of people to just have in this phone. I can post about someone and end their career with that many followers, and people have. And I, in the past, have, mistakenly. And I think the risk with social media is that everyone is reading everything with an angry lens. As soon as someone messages me, I immediately think that that person is angry and out to get me. And it's taken so long for me to just take a step back and say, if someone is willing to criticize me, that means that they trust that I can be better. If I did not trust that you can be better, I would not criticize you. I would not waste my time on you. So I think a lot of the times, if someone messages you on social media and criticizes you and says that you should do things differently, see that as a sign of trust that they believe you can do better. And that, I think, allows us to take a positive lens that, hey, someone is reaching out to me because they want me to be better, and therefore they are looking out for me.
Yeah. Isn't part of the problem, though, that the companies who run these platforms base their business model on polarisation? They want to keep you on the site as long as possible. They know that humans react to having their political views challenged in the same flight or fight reaction that physical violence has, and so they are intensely engaged in it. So their business model relies on making you angry. I mean, isn't that the problem we've got? I mean, you may have a very nuanced attitude towards it, sound like you do, but most of us don't. We just smash back.
Well, you know, truthfully, a lot of the times people who are harassing me on the internet are not young people. It's just a reality.
I'm not drawing a distinction between young and old people at all.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of young people, I think, who have already accepted that social media is a harmful place because often it is young people that are target of abuse. Like a lot of the times when I get abused on social media, it's actually people who have retired and I just don't have anything better to do.
So maybe we should have an age limit on social media or something.
Maybe on voting too, but I don't know.
Well done. I think I support what you're saying because I've got 9 mokopuna and they're varying in ages from 10 to 29, and they've all gone off Facebook because they said it's destructive, and very similar comments. Keyboard warriors are generally old grey hairs. They don't mean their nanny, let's be really clear, but you know, they don't.
It's middle-aged white guys like me, isn't it?
Yeah. But they don't.
I can take it.
But seriously, they just don't see Facebook as the place to be, and they say, "Oh, all you old people get on there and talk to each other, and show pictures of your food, and then moan about us young people."
Can I say I've blocked my entire family on Facebook? Because you know what they do is that I post something on Facebook, then one person will see it and call my mum, and then they'll have a chat, and then my mum will be like, "What did you post on Facebook?" So you know what I've done is that I've blocked my entire family, so no one knows what I'm up to. I'm just living a double life.
Have either of you two got strong views on this, or should we take another question? You're a face-to-face man, eh?
Kill the damn. I just, relationships. Just
Yeah.
let's do away with this. We can't control it. If artificial intelligence, they're going to lie to us over things. Go to the meeting, speak to the politician, get a sense, look him in the face or her in the face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Or ear in the face.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I got quite a bit of sympathy for that. Okay, I do. Yes, sir.
I invite you to consider that the art of enrolment and conversation become a lost art, I would say, and this is the difficulty. I find myself swamped with that many views against or whatever point of view. It's hard to discern the authenticity or the objectivity behind it. And as a consequence, you reach some issues, you just say, well, how does it affect me? Don't see any value. You switch off and you forget it. Is this a trend you're finding happening?
You guys can work out a spokesperson for yourself. Yeah, well, maybe, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Denis, but I guess we do have, there's a ceiling about how much stuff we can focus and care about, I guess. I mean, I get this question a lot in the media, and I'll say, why didn't you cover the coup in Botswana the other day? You did a massive story about the coup in the National Party. And that, aren't all humans equal? And you can philosophically understand their point, but you can there's a limit to, should we only be involved in the things that are directly affecting us? Or?
Depends, doesn't it? I mean...
I'm just trying to make the best of a bad question, though, to be fair. Sorry, mate.
I mean, it depends. Can you do something about it? Does it mean anything to you? Is it important at that time? You can't have the whole bloody thing going on.
How do you make people care about stuff, though?
Well, it's up to them, isn't it?
Well, as an activist, I guess that's what you lot have been doing, right? Making people care about stuff that doesn't affect them. Because, I mean, surely if you look at the whole history of sex work, I mean, for the men, it wasn't even illegal for men, was it? It was fine. It was the women who got busted. So why should a man care about the, It's about making people care about stuff, isn't it? Isn't that what activism kind of is? I don't see why not. Yeah, away you go. Yeah, it's the classic first they came for so-and-so, isn't it? And then, right? Yeah.
I just felt like getting up there and saying, I've got a kid who's non-binary, so I want to say thank you so much. I feel really emotional about it. I grew up in a hut and, I'm bi. Probably some of my friends would know. I'm in a supposedly heterosexual relationship. I'm married, got 2 kids. And I'm just going to go with my emotion. My kid is 11 and says, 3 non-binary. And not the first kid in the school. The school's freaking awesome. The school uses their preferred pronouns. And I'm so proud of my child who allows me to say daughter, but also child, and is pushing us along, schooling us. And this thing about mentoring the younger generation, it's so powerful. And there's not other non-binary kids around my child, live in the, urban market bubble. But so it's an amazing thing, what issues affect me,
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that, and thank you for being brave enough to stand up with your story. Really appreciate that. Good on you. Got another question up the back?
Thank you. I just want to ask, when the time for conversation does eventually come around, how do you figure out which parts of your platform you have to learn to be willing to compromise with, and which parts of your platform you have to learn to dig your heels in? Yeah.
I think it's really difficult, and certainly you have to have your bottom lines, and it's a visceral thing, and it's a consensus thing as well, and you might have your bottom line, but your colleagues might have a different one, or, you know, the people in the trenches with you. So it is really hard I mean, you know what you want, so I don't think there's a problem about that. You know what you're going for. You should. You should at least be clear on that. But in terms of the stages that you have to go through, the compromises, you know, that really keep you awake, and that you have to take on board. I think we're still wrestling, I think, with that. It's very tricky.
It strikes me that several of you must have been in that situation. You know, when I think about things like same-sex marriage, and that the compromise position, wasn't it early on through, I think it was Tim Barnett's Members' Bill, which went to, what did we call them? I can't even remember what we called those. Civil unions, wasn't it? Yeah, civil unions. So, and then some will see that as a betrayal. Oh, you sold us out for civil unions. So there's a lot of political strategy going on there, right? Yeah?
Oh, totally. And, you know, Tim and I like my wine at night. And, you know, he taught me the word polemic. That was because I'd be firing off fire emails to Tim at midnight saying, you're going to sell us down the, you know, but you have to, so you have all these delicate relationships, and Tim and I are good mates, and then we're not, you know, so it's like that, you know, when you're in a movement. But you have to keep your elbows on the table and keep talking with each other.
There must have been a discussion like that for those who wanted to reform cannabis law to a degree, right? Because instead they went for what they would have considered the holy grail of legalisation, but failed and got nothing. And so you could argue that they could have gone for decriminalisation, right? So there's always a bit of a political calculus, isn't there, or a strategic calculus? Yeah. And I'm thinking in the Māori situation, I mean, all of those treaty settlements are massive compromises, aren't they? I mean, the Crown takes the entire South Island and gives you $170 million. Well, that's true, right? I mean, didn't they work out there was about 2% of land value or something that's been given back? I mean, that is it? Yeah, okay.
Less than that.
South Canterbury Finance.
Yeah, well, that was 1.6 billion.
That was more than the treaty settlement, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 1.6 billion, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, so yeah, it's
We certainly, I'll just give you, our claim was lodged in 1987. We got our tribunal report in 2003. We got our final settlement in 2009. And we spent all that time in discussion with the Crown. And it didn't matter what colour they were, whether they were blue or red or pink or green or whatever. The reality was always the same, and the power did not sit with us. We produced a 553-page report through the Waitangi Tribunal, and it still went back to the fiscal envelope. The original settlement for Wellington and the Hutt Valley, according to the Crown, was $5 million. And Mahara remembers it like I do very well. And the negotiation went on forever. Can I just say, in response to that question, all I could think about was Kenny Rogers and the Gambler. You got to know when to hold it. You got to know when to fold it. You got to know when to walk away and know when to run.
Kenny Rogers is a secret activist.
I thought we had one here. No, don't hear. Thank you. I'll come back. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I come from Greece, and I grew up during the Greek dictatorship in the 60s, and I wanted to reclaim the word activism. I grew up with parents that were lawyers fighting against the dictatorship. I worked at Amnesty International and Greenpeace, and I do not accept, we all felt like we were activists. Activism was a word that defined creating a better world. So I'm not giving it to the extreme right wing, personally. But my question is, I agree with you about kanohi ki te kanohi, and I wonder, how do we do this practically? Because I do believe that it's the biggest form of revolutionary act and activism today is kanohi ki te kanohi. So how do we go about it?
Yeah, so you do it. You get out, you meet people, you have a kai, you have a kōrero, you establish trusting relationships. It's social, it's relational. So, you know, and we're doing it here right now, you know. So you go to that hui, you go to that wānanga, you go to that funeral, you know, that tangihanga. You look each other in the eye. When people are in trouble, you help out humbly. You know, it's just be a human being, and never mind the structures, the colours, the whatever. Just trust each other, and you know we're primarily good. The first Māori to speak in the New Zealand Parliament was Tariha Te Wananui in the 4th Parliament, 3rd session, September 1868. And he said, the power of good is stronger than the power of evil. That's a whānau ora speech. He said, we are similar, but not the same. Well, that's diversity. And he said, when evil arises, let me look at it and you look at it also. Well, that's co-governance. That's the first speech by a Māori New Zealand Parliament. It's relational.
Have any of you considered standing for Parliament? And if not, why not?
I've worked for 3 Prime Ministers. That's why not.
Dame Catherine must have been asked.
No. We're always trying to build new friendships. We're always grateful to be invited back. So, but no, I haven't been asked.
It's a serious question, though, because it's some people will see that's where ultimate power can reside, although a lot of the changes that we've been talking about are either done from the backbench or done from outside Parliament. Have you got thoughts about that, Liz?
I did once run for the mayoralty of South Wairarapa District Council and lost. That put me off pretty quickly. But, you know, having been in and around Wellington and obviously in and around Parliament for a very long time, it's a thankless job. And my cousin over there, he took the role. Very grateful am I that he did.
Will the Young New Zealander of the Year be a young politician one day?
I've been asked twice, and I've said no both times. I've got a Masters of Laws to do next year, you know. But just to answer your question, I've been doing, my taxi drivers think I'm a bit mad. I went to bed at 12, got up at 4, and with my glasses on in the taxi, and I was like, how's your day going? Wouldn't it be great if we legalized cannabis? And then suddenly the guy started telling me that his wife had depression and needed to get access to cannabis. And I had no idea that me just like starting this weird conversation about legalizing cannabis would go down to that. And then I did the same thing with the taxi drivers that was bringing me down. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if we legalized cannabis and just went to bed? And I'm pretty sure that taxi drivers started thinking about it. So I guess sometimes all you got to do is plant the seeds.
Yeah, well, that's what they tell me about cannabis.
Dame Catherine, I just wondered what the progress is on your book, and with the other members of the panel, how, or have you thought of writing a book, or are you writing a book?
I just want to acknowledge Jenny Williams is an old lecturer of mine at Teachers College in the 70s, and it wasn't that she was a bully, just that you've been very encouraging. But no, there's no book pending. We are chapters in many books, actually. We're always writing chapters for other people's books, and they're usually evidence-based, not opinion, usually academic tombs. So no book coming.
Book that changed your life?
Or the Bible?
No, I want a non-fiction book. Sorry, yeah. Did I say that out loud?
Yeah, I think, yes, I spoke of it before. Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. You know, you'll see it when you believe it. That was a big drop of the ocean for me.
Yeah. Anyone else? I like these book that changed your life stuff. Anyone? Like, you know, when you're a teenager, you're 15 or something, and you pick something up and it just... No?
You're looking at me, so I have to answer. No, because I'm an avid reader, so I would read on average 3 to 4 books a week.
Wow.
Because, you know, Joy Cowley's the one that says it. You know, you open up a book and you go into another life. And it's interesting. I'm fascinated. So, can I just say, since Trump, I've been reading a lot of books by Americans because I can't get my head around it. And I still can't. I'm just saying. So that's why I read
Have you worked it out yet?
Well, yes, sort of. But really the point is, everything has to come in a good foundation. And I don't think that country came on a good foundation, and it's never been right since. And, you know, I look at the gun laws and you're not allowed to have abortions in many states now, but it's actually okay if you go in and take your gun and kill half a dozen kids and a teacher. Isn't that perplexing?
Yeah, it is. And just to try and railway that back on track in terms of what we're talking about.
Have you read Ned Fletcher's book on the English translation of Te Tiriti?
No.
And so his hypothesis is that Te Tiriti is the original document and the treaty is the English trying to interpret the Māori sense. And he said, and it came out of the anti-slave movement. You know, a crew in London who were of good heart and of good intent. And he said, wouldn't it be a terrible thing if the foundation document of a nation was founded on a lie or on a deceit? And I think it's a beaut way of looking at it, you know, that the intent of those who came up with the treaty was actually of good intent. So let us make it so.
Interesting. I was also thinking, you know, seriously, when you were talking about America and talking about abortion, I was thinking about all those activists in the 60s and 70s, right? And I wonder whether part of the lesson is there's not just a clear trajectory. Like, we often think there's a linear thing of progress and social progress. But it's that eternal vigilance thing, because you can turn around and find that suddenly abortion is illegal, and all the things you fought for and thought that were just going to keep flying along, on autopilot, don't exist anymore. Does that have any resonance for any of you?
I think, can I say this? I think you're right.
Very quick one on my head on that one. Any other questions?
I was just wondering, as activists, do you ever take a day off, or do you feel that you're having to always be activating, even if, and you have to bring back the energy each time?
I have serious productivity anxiety. So as soon as I stop working, or as soon as I start doing something that brings me the slightest amount of joy, I start feeling like I'm not doing enough and that everyone else is doing more than me. So productivity anxiety is something that I haven't actually been able to get rid of. But in hindsight, I don't actually have time. With uni and work and everything, I don't have actually any time. I'm going to go back to the question of the book, and all I'm going to say is in stores July 11th.
Cool. Just, I'm really enjoying your talk and the contribution you've made. But one thing I just want to throw out to be a little bit provocative is, can activism only be a force for the left? So if I think about COVID and mobilising a response to protect community, is that not an example of similar techniques used to change? Or if I look at Zelensky in Ukraine, my son was living in Kiev and has a Ukrainian girlfriend, and the mobilising of a response against tyranny, is that not a positive force that is not left or right? And both are existential challenges. So I just want to ask the question about activism, whether it's owned by one end.
See, who the hell decided that we were activists? So I just get up in the bloody morning, you know. You know what I mean? And like,
I think the people who put the panel together decided that you were activists, actually.
Like, but you're right. You know,
fair point. And we did talk about politics and activism, didn't we? It's a good question.
Yeah. Anyway.
Can I say, a lot of the times the word activist is used synonymously as, feminist is an activist, or or queer rights activist, right? And sometimes I just think, I'm not a feminist, I'm normal. If you don't support women, then you're a sexist. You're either normal or you're sexist. Do you know what I mean? It's just like this idea just because I believe in the rights of women doesn't make me better than normal or superior than normal.
No, my profession takes a lot of the blame for that, and rightfully so, because we run around asking politicians, are you a feminist? Are you a feminist? So it's a bit of, the media, because we use shorthand on stuff, often that becomes quite crude, doesn't it? So we shorthand say, Māori activist Tami Iti, when he's a lot more than that. So just to flagellate myself on that. Very quickly, what?
You're asking a question on Morning Report.
What was that?
I said you should think what you just said then next time that you are asking a question on Morning Report.
I've been schooled, haven't I? I've been seriously told off by that gentleman. Thank you. Fair enough. I've had the mic for an hour and a half.
Kia ora, I'm Stephanie. I'm interested in, you're all very charismatic as leaders. What I'm interested in is how you see social change happening, and what is the balance between the need for charismatic leadership and the need to build movement.
Interesting, eh? I reckon political parties have that issue too, right? Like, we've got this guy who's got no charisma, but shit.
So leadership is defined by followship. You don't get, you can call yourself a leader, but if you haven't got anyone following you.
Yeah. I think they called it United Future, didn't they?
I think they're the umbrella party now. This idea of being charismatic, for example, the most recent polls show that the National Party is the highest polling party. However, Christopher Luxon just can't seem to get out of the negative rankings. He's got a -7 in terms of preferability as Prime Minister. And I just wonder, why is the National Party polling as the highest political party in the country? Yet Christopher Luxon is polling in the negatives. And I think it's probably because on the first day, as his job as a leader of the National Party, he announced that abortion was tantamount to murder. A few days later, he said, the causes of crime is young men sitting in a garage in South Auckland. And then he said that young people or disabled people who did not work were taking a free ride. And I think a lot of the times charismatic leadership is really important because you see someone like Chris Hipkins is likable. You may not like his policies, but you like him as a character, and that's why he's preferred as Prime Minister, but the Labour Party isn't actually polling that well.
See, Luxon only sleeps 4 hours a night. He's an insomniac, and we know that insomnia is not good for good decision-making.
Okay, this is kind of spiralling out of control. It's been pretty interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've been loving it. It's been great, Kōrero, actually. But no, honestly, I'm getting a red flag waved at me from the back saying it's time to wind it up. So can we do one more question, do you reckon? Has anyone got a real blinder of a question? It's got to be a good one, mate.
I just wanted to pick up on the comment earlier on about speaking to a room that already agree with what you're talking about. What do we take away from this? We've seen your work for all of you across our media, driving change. But how do you transfer that responsibility to us?
I reckon you each have a crack at that and we'll wind it up.
Those that have ears to hear, let them hear.
From my perspective, say after me, everyone. Sex worker rights.
Sex worker rights.
Sex work isn't prostitution.
Sex work isn't prostitution.
There you are.
There you go. Job done.
I don't think you transfer responsibility. I think you have it or you don't. And what I'm hoping is that all of you understand your responsibilities always to yourself, to your immediate whānau, your wider whānau, and to Aotearoa.
I would say, no one owns activism. Just because someone has been doing activism in a field for a very long time doesn't mean you need their permission to start doing your own thing. When in 2017, I was 17 years old when the church leader approached me and I said, I don't really care what the older people are doing. I don't care what's already happening. I mean, I did look around. It's just taking the responsibility. I don't think anyone will give it to you. You just create it yourself.
Kia ora. You're driving into Wellington at rush hour in the morning. You're all in the same car, so that's 5 of you. And suddenly the traffic stops. And it stops for a while, and you look out, and there's some people standing on the road, or sitting on the road, and they've glued their hands to the road. Where do you position yourselves?
I stay in the car till the cops come and move them away.
I'm looking for the nail polish remover.
I'm listening to Morning Report.
I think I wind down the window or, push the electric button and talk to them.
Well, truthfully, the planet is dying. So, and I just don't know. I feel like a lot of people who glue themselves to the road are actually destroying the movement for climate action. there have been lines of advocates who have been very effective at advocating for climate action, and I feel people who just, throw soups onto paintings and glue themselves onto bloody roads are actually portraying climate activists as irrational and immature, and they're doing more harm to climate action than anyone else. And, I would just tell, I'd be very angry, but obviously you can't run them over because that's a crime.
All right, a big round of applause for our guests today.